So like I want to start this off by saying like I used to like so I'm a member of like your Facebook group, like the Free Market Progressive, or like it was called like the neoliberal memes for
Yeah,
or whatever libertarian memes for
yeah.
neolibertarians. I was a member of that for like the longest time, like whenever I first realized I was a libertarian, and like I was a big fan of like Gary Johnson and like Justin Amash. So obviously that was like the place for me to be. Um, and then I followed you on Twitter. Like I thought you were like I respected you as a um, in my mind a fellow libertarian, and
I love the past tense being used here.
well yeah this is definitely the past tense. All these bridges have been severed, pretty much. Like what kind of made me like lose that camaraderie with like I guess you and like your page is like I went to the Pennsylvania convention with the sole purpose of being with my friends and being there to potentially vote in their party elections to help stop the Mises takeover in Pennsylvania. And we did stop the Mises takeover, but I didn't need to vote. Like that was the whole point of me going. But like you were in the Facebook group that we had that was specifically for like people who are in the party that don't like the growing influence of the Mises Caucus. You were in that group, and you were saying things like, "Oh, you guys are stupid for trying to like keep going with this." Like, like you remember that stuff, right? Like you were saying how like the party is just dead already and stuff like that. Like, you remember that, right?
I do recall, and I will gladly still say that today. But if I recall, the thing that really prompted my severance from that group was criticism of figures that I felt were entirely part of the problem, and that the other people of the group did not
Yeah,
feel
like
such, like Spike Cohen
yeah,
and to a slightly lesser degree Ashley Shade and some other figures who are ostensibly part of the anti-Mises Caucus movement, but I fully believe still contribute to the problem that they represent. And my view on that, which I still completely support, is that unless you are willing to get to the real root of the problem, any kind of resistance is just futile and fleeting and isn't going to, accomplish the goals that it would seem that it wants to accomplish. So when the people of that group didn't seem to me to be interested in actually solving the problem as I saw it, then they are basically part of the problem, and that was really, what caused me to leave there.
sure, that's fair. I at that time I was still like very gung ho about like making sure the party stayed the way that it was, or making sure that like Mises didn't gain more control. And like I felt like you being in there like saying those things like kind of like it was supposed to be like a unifying place, so, like people who wanted to unify against this growing negative like aspect of the party. And for me it was like you were going against that, and like I didn't really I don't, it wasn't like a good vibe for me.
Well, there was something that you said amidst that I think really illustrates part of the
Sure, let's go for it.
difference here, and it was that you said something about keeping the party as it is, and that does not solve the problem. Just
Right, yeah.
just stopping the Mises Caucus where they are now and keeping the party as it is, or even as it was 2 years ago, say, that is not solving the problem. There are so many, like, the problem with the Libertarian Party goes so much deeper than just the gains that the Mises Caucus have made in the last 2 to 4 years, and so I don't think you put a lot of I don't think you were actively thinking about it when you said keep the party as it is. I think that was just something that you naturally said, which I think is kind of more revealing to the difference in mindset that we have here.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. So one of the big things that I wanted to kind of discuss with you early on was the thing that you posted, like the iceberg meme. Like I don't know.
Yes.
I think I was higher on that meme than I should have been, but that's just my
Well,
opinion.
lower is worse, so presumably you mean you were lower on it
Yeah,
than you
no,
thought.
I should have been
Yeah.
higher. That's my.
Yeah.
I like the idea that like Brianna Coyle should have even like been included in that meme is ridiculous. Like she is like the most vocal person like speaking out against like the growing influence of paleoconservatives in the party. How she even got on that meme is like beyond me. Like I don't.
Well, she was on the highest tier of it, which is the least problematic. But no, I will, and I've discussed with her at length. We do DMs on Twitter a lot, and I'm upfront with her about how I feel about some of her activities. And I think overall she's very good, and I hope and believe that she will continue to push herself in a better direction as time goes on. But I do stand by it that she was on the iceberg meme even still.
Like why? Like what would what does she actively do that would like contribute to the alt-right pipeline?
The whole point of the iceberg meme is that each tier, I mean, it's not really a meme, it's like a graphic, but whatever. The iceberg graphic, the whole point of that is that each tier normalizes the tier beneath it. So it's like, okay, the very, very bottom tier, in the dark depths, was like literal Nazis like Richard Spencer and Cantwell and Gary North, who literally wants to stone gay people to death and things like that. That's like as bad as you can get. That's the worst of the worst. There are few people who are willing to ally themselves with those, but it's the Cantwells and the Spencers are normalized by the Dave Smiths.
Mm-hmm.
He has them on the podcast, says, oh, we have so much in common, you're triggering the right people, he entertains the Holocaust and all these things. I don't think I should have to explain to you why Dave Smith is bad. I think we can at least agree that far. But so now you've gotten one step up. So you're not, Dave Smith is not out there himself calling for genocide of non-whites or stoning gay people to death or anything like that, but he's helping platform and promote those ideas. He's not just, he ostensibly did a debate with Richard Spencer, but we all know that wasn't really a debate. It was much more positive than any debate would be. Half of it was, more than half of it was just agreeing and saying how much they have in common. So I think that you would agree that Dave Smith helps to promote Richard Spencer and Cantwell and whatnot. So then the next step up from there is who is promoting Dave Smith. And if you're promoting a guy who promotes Nazis, that's a couple degrees of separation, but ultimately through that pipeline you're still getting to the point of promoting Nazis. And then you go one more step up, and then you're at somebody maybe like Spike Cohen, who's promoting people who promote Dave Smith, who promotes Richard Spencer, and you just keep going. That's what the different levels of the meme are about, is each tier tends to normalize or promote the tier beneath it, who normalizes and promotes the tier beneath it, who normalizes, and so on, until you get to the very bottom where you're now platforming and promoting and spreading these ideas that are outright genocidal or white supremacist.
Sure, but like where does so Brianna, who would you say she's platforming that would be like leading to all the way down to Christopher Cantwell and like Fuentes?
So it's she would be normalizing like one tier down, so that would be like promoting Larry Sharp or something, who has ties with he wanted to get, during his gubernatorial campaign in 2018, he was putting, I mean, it wasn't him, it was his staffers, but the buck stops with him, obviously. So there was putting out requests to go on podcasts with Jordan Peterson and other alt-light kind of figures, the IDW types who lead down the road of anti-feminism, Islamophobia, things like that. So it's and again, you could say, oh well, it sounds like you're calling Larry Sharp a Nazi, and that's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's not what it is. It's about, this person promotes this person who promotes this person who then does these awful things. And it's irritating when people like to take that criticism out of context or not listen to the substance of it and then say just, oh, you're calling blah, blah a Nazi, just in the most reductive way that just makes it seem like such a ridiculous argument, when it's like, there's a process to this criticism, and it goes deeper than just X is a Nazi, which is not something I'm saying, except for the ones that literally are openly Nazis, like Richard Spencer. But for somebody like Larry Sharp, like I said, he promotes these other IDW figures who are, would be deeper on that iceberg level. Or, he has. I don't even follow him anymore. I'm sure he's done even more that's worse that I'm not aware of. These people tend to get worse and not better. But he has, allied himself with the Mises Caucus time and time again. So then you're getting down to the level of somebody like Michael Heiss, who obviously is promoting people like Smith, who is then again promoting people like Spencer and Cantwell. So that would be where Brianna comes into the meme, is by promoting people like Larry Sharp, or even just there's a movement in the libertarian within the libertarian movement that is all about this, liberty, unity. We need to stop infighting and come together and focus on what we agree and all that kind of stuff. And it's often sold as this relentless positivity, and that's kind of an Ashley Shade thing.
Yeah.
So even that just delightful positivity for unity has that effect, because what you're saying when you want unity is that we need to stop talking about these differences, which include things like promoting white supremacists.
Well,
we need to put that issue under the rug.
Well, you have to know that, like, whenever the liberty unity thing was, like, at its, like, peak, or, like, even whenever it was, like, still a thing, like, Brianna was, like, not for it. Like, she was, like, actively, like, preaching against it. Like, she doesn't want unity with those alt-right types, right?
And that is good, and that's part of why Brianna is very high up on that, meaning she's the least problematic, but she still is promoting people who do promote such things. So it's people tend to talk out both sides of their mouth with this thing, where on the one hand they explicitly will oppose something, but then implicitly do other actions or ally themselves with other people who do support it. So that makes the opposition kind of hollow in that, framing. You can say that you oppose this unity with the Mises Caucus, and you can be part of the Cathedral Caucus or whatever that they want to call it, that is the opposition group. But if you're still telling people to go out and vote for Larry Sharp, who allies himself with the Mises Caucus, then, where actually are you on this issue?
I mean, I guess, like, so me specifically, like, why am I so far down on the iceberg?
Well, the reason that you were so far down is because you specifically were defending Dave Smith and you both have and haven't taken back that tweet, which is why I continue to reference it all the time. Regardless of our differences, I'll oppose his nomination, blah, 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 but if he gets it, I'll still support Dave Smith because he's better than any Democrat or Republican thing. You posted that, then you said you don't agree with it, and then I was like, okay, maybe there's some growth here, but then, like, a couple months later, you posted effectively the exact same thing, like, the exact same message to it, so I still consider that a valid criticism. But that was why you were lower on the meme, is because you're directly going like 3 tiers down to promote this guy who is a Holocaust denier and, constantly shares and posts and says horribly homophobic and transphobic and
right.
otherwise bigoted content. So it's like, again, I don't have to tell you how bad Dave Smith is, so I don't know why I have to tell you how bad implicitly or explicitly promoting Dave Smith is.
I want to actually pull up, because I deleted the tweet because I disagreed with it after a while, after thinking about it, just because, like, I didn't say I would support him. I said I would vote for him, which is definitely, I think that's
like the most tangible form of support that you can give.
Well, supporting is like you donate to the campaign, like you buy merch, like all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just, here we go. Okay, here's the tweet. So I said, in all seriousness, I'll actively fight against his nomination, but if Dave Smith wins the LP nomination for president, then I'll vote for him. I have my issues with him, but he's definitely better than anything the duopoly has to offer. So, like, that was me looking at individual issues that I care about, like ending the drug war, ending wars, criminal justice reform, things like that. Like, I have a hard time seeing those kinds of policy points from people like Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, right? Like, I wouldn't
But the being a white supremacist and Holocaust denier is worth that to you?
If we can, like, specifically reduce the harm caused by by the government, then for me at that point, yes. But then like I wouldn't vote for him because I wouldn't want to give him the validation of like this is the guy who the Libertarian Party is putting out there for people to go vote for. Like I wouldn't vote for that. Like that's not
Okay, well, let's return to that though. That you don't think that the harm done by a white supremacist Holocaust denier being the head of state of the most powerful country in the world would do more damage than whatever damage the government is doing at present. You don't think that the short and long-term effects of that situation, of this anti-vaxxer, homophobic, transphobic, white supremacist, Holocaust denying, democracy hating, bigot that he is, you don't think that the effects of that would be more damaging and insidious, especially in the long term, than the current state of affairs for the government status quo?
Well, yes, I do, which is why I retracted the tweet and deleted it and made sure that I,
But you literally just said that.
Yes, for me, when I made the tweet, when I'm looking at individual issues of ending the drug war, ending the war overseas, like, and significantly reforming the criminal justice system, like, he would have been the guy out of the three parties, if he were to get the nomination, that I would say he's the guy to do that. But, like, that's just ignoring everything that you just said, which I would agree with, that, like, yes, those are all bad things, and I would not vote for him for that reason, because I wouldn't want to see someone like that be president,
Okay, so then that's, like I said, you deleted that and you say you don't stand by that anymore, but I just happen to have something here that, like I said, is the same sentiment. So this other guy, I don't know who he is, some awful Twitter person, posted, Dave Smith is morally superior to Kamala Harris because Kamala jailed people for weed offenses and laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked weed, while Dave Smith calls out the war on drugs in his podcast intro. And then the at worst account, the guy with the owl head, I've seen him around before, said Dave Smith is awful, but yeah, this is pretty much inarguably true, and you liked that tweet. So again, that's how am I supposed to believe that you don't stand by the original tweet when you're going around liking tweets that echo the exact same sentiment that original tweet did? That, Dave Smith is clearly better than, Kamala Harris or any, presumably you think that of, any other anti-weed politician than just the general status quo, Bushes and Cheneys and Obamas and Bidens and whatnot.
Sure. So, like, Kamala Harris did jail people for marijuana, and she did laugh about it. So, is that bad or no?
Of course it is.
Okay.
And we don't, and that's something we don't even need to, bother. We obviously both agree on that, and we know that we both oppose the war on drugs and, want full decriminalization or outright legalization of everything, and that we don't even need to go over that issue.
So the nature of those tweets is specifically talking about the war on drugs, and like Dave Smith, for all of his faults,
it's not just saying Dave Smith is better on the issue of drugs than Kamala Harris. It said Dave Smith is morally superior to Kamala Harris as presumably as a comprehensive moral view. It did not say on the issue of drugs. It said Dave Smith is morally superior to Kamala Harris because, not is morally superior on the issue of drugs because.
Well, Dave Smith may use white supremacist rhetoric, but like Kamala Harris upholds the white supremacist system of jailing black people for drugs. Like, she does that. Like, she has been doing that, and she's still doing that. Like, she promised that she would decriminalize marijuana whenever she got, whenever the administration got into power, but then now she's saying she doesn't have time for it. Like, I think that's far, far worse than actually, like, because so for example, like, Donald Trump used very anti-immigrant rhetoric, and he did anti-immigrant shit, but Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they don't use that rhetoric, but they still do anti-immigrant shit. Like, they, locking down the borders. Like, since COVID, immigration has gone significantly down, right? So, like, she's actively using state power to do, like, white supremacist things.
This is another thing that you don't even have to sell me on. I will readily agree that Kamala and Biden are both awful, and that their policies are both awful, and they're both awful on drugs, and they're both awful on criminal justice, and they're both awful on immigration. But that's something that we don't even have to dispute whatsoever.
I'm glad.
What I will dispute is that you don't see any additional damage from either Trump or a Dave Smith character, they're very similar, saying these explicitly racist things, let's just directly, undeniably, openly racist statements, that you reject the notion that that is any more harmful than policies that have a, racially biased outcome, which we know that the war on drugs was, and that we know the war on drugs was, when it was founded, targeted on the basis of race and
Yep.
throughout the 90s and whatnot. But there's still, I don't know how you can't see that the damage of explicitly racist rhetoric and or policies is more damaging than policies that just have a racist outcome.
And you can also look at the fact that, like, Dave Smith, whenever Spike Cohen got in that little dispute with the BLM chapter, the BLM 757 or whatever, like, when because Spike Cohen had gone and, like, done some speeches with them and, like, shown their support, and BLM 757 had, like, endorsed him. Whenever all that was happening, Dave Smith was saying stuff like, "Oh, you guys should be grateful. Like, this guy, Spike Cohen, he if he were to get power, he would do things that would significantly help black people, and you just don't understand that." Like, that was extremely terrible. Like, like, just because you support the war on drugs or support any of the war on drugs does not mean that you know what's best for black people. Like, that's really fucked up. Like, I do agree that, like, yes, like, Dave Smith is not the best person on the war on drugs either, but, like, for me, like, actively having used the state power to jail black people, or any people of color for that matter, it is much worse than platforming people that would, like, say bad things about them. I think both are really bad. Don't get me wrong. I think both are terrible. And like I said, that's why I retracted my statement about voting for Dave Smith, because he does platform those racist people, so I wouldn't vote for him. But I think that looking specifically on the war on drugs, on that one issue, I think that Dave Smith is more moral than Kamala Harris on that issue.
Well, again, that wasn't what the tweet said. It didn't say more moral on that issue.
Well, it was about the war on drugs. Like, the tweets up there in the thread were about the war on drugs.
Okay,
no?
Without any qualifiers, do you think that comprehensively Dave Smith is more moral than Kamala Harris?
Probably not. I don't know much about Kamala Harris. Probably not.
There's just such a deep chasm of misunderstanding here that I just don't even know where to begin. You and so many other anarchists and radical libertarians just completely not even reject, just don't even conceive of the notion of institutions or precedent or the impact of rhetoric or in setting narratives and the second, third, fourth, fifth order effects across society from those things. It's just such a narrow, myopic view of concrete policy that rejects the so much greater and ultimately more powerful context of the messages that society is sending, which ripple across all of economics and culture and society and education and everything else. That just the damage done to our values as a country and as a people, which inevitably will turn back around and flow upstream to politics again.
Yeah.
It's just that is so much more fundamental than any political policy, awful as it may be. And to think that it would be more beneficial to have an explicit white supremacist with ostensibly good policy positions in office than somebody who holds up, liberal egalitarian values, but either supports or just tacitly continues bad policy is just something I can't even comprehend thinking.
I just reject the idea that, like, Kamala Harris holds liberal egalitarian values. I don't think she does. I don't think any.
Other than the policies that she supports, which don't So you're gonna, if this is why I didn't want to do like a live debate or something, because that would immediately be taken as you don't care about these policies, blah blah blah, and that's not what I'm saying whatsoever. These policies are awful, and they have a very
Yeah, no,
real.
I wouldn't. I'm not trying to do some bad. Like, I know you agree that like
Okay,
those
but
policies are bad.
okay, so with that in mind, besides the fact that she supports these policies, which have been well documented by researchers and analysts and sociologists and all the rest of it to have racially disproportionate outcomes. Other than supporting policies like that, what have you seen from Kamala or from Obama or from Jeb Bush or any other name typical status quo politician here that would lead you to believe that they fundamentally do not hold liberal egalitarian values at a level even remotely comparable to somebody like Dave Smith?
So sure. Like so we're just talking about like things they say, not like things that like they like policy they do.
Unless you are pointing to a policy along the lines of Jim Crow or something that is explicitly racially targeted, then yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about
Like
actions or rhetoric or anything else from their past that leads you to believe that they fundamentally do not have a liberal kind of egalitarian guiding belief.
well, sure. So Joe Biden, he supported the 1994 crime bill, and that was explicitly like anti-black. It criminalized a lot of the behaviors that black people were doing at the time, and yeah, like that was, and that also allowed the police to, just disproportionately target people of color and over policing black neighborhoods and things like that. Kamala Harris also like not only did she laugh about jailing people for marijuana, she also lied about jailing parents of truant kids, and like a lot of those truant kids were black and also other people of color because like this is California, very diverse place in California. Um, so just things like that, like I don't think that like you can. Oh, and just Joe Biden said like if you don't vote for him, you're not black. Just a lot of racist shit that he said in the past. He said like Obama was the like the first black man of like status or some shit like that. Like back whenever like 2009, whenever he was like first president and stuff like that. So Joe Biden has said a lot of racist shit too, and so has Kamala Harris. Like I don't think that like
Okay, let's
you can make the argument that like they're better than the things they said that are better than things that Dave Smith has said, but I don't think you can make the argument that like they're egalitarian because like I don't think they are.
Okay, let's look back at what you just said then. So we have the crime bill, which again, you don't need to sell me on how bad it was, how
Right.
racially
It was basically
disproportionate its outcomes were.
I mentioned that because you said it can be comparable to Jim Crow, and like I think you can make a big comparison with that in Jim Crow.
In terms of outcomes, I would agree, and again,
And
you don't have
intent.
to go over but I if you believe that supporting the crime bill is inherently the 94 crime bill is inherently a moral indicator that somebody holds racist, like actively racist beliefs, then why did the overwhelming majority of black community leaders at the time also support the bill? And I'm not defending the bill.
Right.
Please do not take this as a defense of the bill. I am not by any means defending the bill. I'm not defending voting for the bill. But if you take voting for or supporting the bill as a sign of explicit white supremacist values so as to prove a disbelief in egalitarianism,
Well,
why did the majority of black community leaders support it?
Well, I don't have to convince you that it's white supremacist. The framework of this is: are they egalitarian? And supporting this bill like will dispel any notion of you being egalitarian, in my opinion. Like I don't have to, like for me to like, I don't have to like convince you that like supporting it is white supremacist. Just the metrics that we're using
in impact, but you do have to convince me that supporting it is white supremacist in terms of a greater value system that by voting for this you are endorsing white supremacy, which is the claim that you're trying to prove right now in saying that Biden, by having supported the crime bill, that's evidence that he fundamentally holds an inegalitarian viewpoint.
Which
How is how do you see that? Just we agree that the outcome of the bill was racially disproportionate, but I am not on board with the claim that anybody who supported the bill that having supported the bill is explicit evidence of a white supremacist value system. I'm not on board and do not believe that argument.
So like the whole basis for that is that like black people supported the bill.
That's one compelling piece of evidence, yes, that if support for the bill is a clear indicator of white supremacy, not just an outcome but an intent, then why did so many black community leaders and politicians support the bill? How does that add up?
Which community leader supported the bill? Because you're aware that like you can be like a person of color and still be conservative, right? Like and not be egalitarian.
Yes, but do you think that the black people who are supporting this bill are white supremacists?
I don't know.
We can point to many examples of, you know, public figures of color who support systems and rhetoric that I entirely believe uphold white supremacy, but I think it's quite uncommon for any people of color to actively believe in white supremacy. That is not something that happens virtually ever. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that, but I do think that like I don't think that they are incapable of holding any egalitarian or illiberal values, because a lot of like,
not.
but that's the frame of this whole thing is like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not egalitarians or any sort of like liberal either.
Well, your reasoning for that, I mean, for one, what does egalitarian mean to you? Because egalitarian doesn't mean libertarian.
No, those
aren't the same thing. So just because somebody doesn't support libertarian policies doesn't mean they still hold a broadly egalitarian liberal.
You know, I wasn't trying to make the claim that like egalitarian was the same thing as libertarian. Like I know it's not. So for me, like it's it's you believe that all people are equal and they deserve equal treatment, basically.
Okay, so then is it not conceivable to you that somebody could hold that primary value system, like what you just said, that all people are, you know, on the basis of race and all gender and all the rest of it, that they're innately equal? Is it impossible to you to believe that somebody with that system of values could be led into believing that crime is this, you know, is out of control and needs to be stopped, or that they could be led to believe that marijuana is somehow damaging enough to justify, you know, a crackdown on laws regarding it? Is it impossible to imagine that somebody with those values could be led to support those policies?
Yes, I could imagine that someone, even a person of color, could be convinced that a policy like this would be, could be, you know, like, compatible with egalitarian values, I guess. But, like, when you consider the things that Joe Biden said about the bill, like, he obviously wasn't coming at it from a place of egalitarianism.
And when Kamala Harris was, you know, imprisoning people for marijuana, which we've already acknowledged and agree was bad, when she was doing that, do you think that she was doing that with explicitly racist intent? That she was saying, I Kamala Harris, half black, half Indian, want to lock up black people because black people are bad? Is that the thought process that you think she was experiencing?
I don't know. I have no evidence for or against that.
You think that is a reasonably plausible thing that she was thinking at that time?
I'm not sure. I don't want to make a claim for or against that because I don't really know.
Okay, I would argue that it is quite unlikely that any such thought process was going through her head, and I would greatly dispute the notion that anybody who opposes or has opposed the legalization of marijuana is automatically revealed to hold fundamentally inegalitarian values. I think that's absurd claim.
When you add it to like the jailing truant kids, when you add it to her support of
And
like
again,
her support of like
so anybody who takes issue with truants, and again, we don't have to. I'm not even talking about the merits of the policies, which I completely disagree with. But you don't think that somebody who thinks that truancy in school is a problem could possibly not hold white supremacist beliefs
when you add all of her
and
policies
have that
together,
motivating the policy.
she also supports like bombing people of color overseas, like all this stuff. Like it's whenever you support racist policies, it's hard for me to like tell, whether you're racist or not. I would lean on the side of like people that support those policies are like racist or racist adjacent.
And on no further basis than the support for the policies. I think that is
Well, things she said around it, like telling migrants from Central and South America not to come. That's pretty racist.
I just
like
I don't think that that's
our government
reasonable at all.
our government's policies led to the situation that would make those migrants want to come here because we destroyed their economies, we destabilized their governments. Like that's our fault, so we should be letting them here. The fact that we're not is like racist.
Absolutely, I support completely open borders, and this is.
But is it racist not to let them?
The nature of our disagreement on any thing is very rarely about policy. We agree probably 95% plus on actual policy positions. It's the issue of rhetoric and institutions that we differ so tremendously on. And this idea that you have that there's essentially zero difference between the status quo generic legacy politicians and fascists or Nazis or communists, that they're all basically like there's such, with you and so many other anarchists, they set this threshold for policy at such a low position and then say anybody above this, they're all bad. There's no reason to even distinguish between them. They're all so bad. Like they're all just unacceptable. There's even bothering to talk about their differences is a waste of time.
I don't think so.
We're only normalizing the evil by even discussing this. Like they're all just so bad. And I don't like, do you agree with that? Am I describing the framework of you and fellow anarchists accurately, or am I strawmanning that?
No, I'm willing to make the concession that like not all politicians are equally terrible.
Okay, that's one positive.
But like, do you not think so? Do you not think that Kamala Harris was racist when she said, "Do not come, do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our borders. If you come to our border, you will be turned back." Is that not racist?
I think it is a racist statement. I do not think it is indicative of like deeply held or explicit racist values, and that is a tremendous difference. And there is a whole lot of literature on that subject about that focusing on trying to identify racists gets in the way of identifying racism. And think that anybody who engages in racism is a racist.
That's fair.
That the focus on that will always get in the way of pursuing racial justice, because then it's more about trying to prove some unprovable intent in people than it is drawing attention to the actual problematic behaviors. So yes, I do think that is a racist statement, but I do not think that inherently proves racist intent or explicit racial animus from Kamala Harris.
I mean, I guess I might like slightly disagree with that. Do you think that she could be considered to have like nativist intent or like be a nativist?
I think that nativism is deeply imbued in American society and most societies, frankly. So
okay.
Again, I think that she is probably acculturated into nativist positions and subconsciously, as most Americans are. But again, I don't think that should be taken as evidence of some grand underlying value system that is fundamentally and directly hostile to people of color or immigrants.
I don't know. I don't think there's really anywhere else we can go with that. I guess. Is there anything else you want to talk about, like on like that broad area, or do you want to go somewhere else?
Just this issue gets to the whole basis of it, that you don't see a substantial difference between somebody who supports bad policies and somebody who just is racist. And it's even if you want to just focus on the issue of policy, even if you don't want to acknowledge any other factors in society of interpersonal communication or relationships or the economy, or anything, even if we're staying focused solely on the issue of policy, do you not think that somebody who is propagating explicit racist sentiments or homophobic or whatever other bigotry, if they're explicitly promoting these values, you don't think that that will ever end up coming back around in policy, that by proliferating racist views, people will adopt them more readily and then later on pursue policies that are more explicitly racist? You don't think that that's likely to happen?
No, I think it is likely. It's already happened. I mean, just look at like Trump, right? So I don't disagree with you there.
So that's Trump's a good one. Do you see any substantial, or even better yet, a like fundamental difference between a Trump and a Biden or a Jeb Bush or somebody like that? Do you see any fundamental difference between Trump and one of them?
Trump and Jeb Bush, probably. Trump and
Sure,
Joe Biden,
yeah.
not. Trump and Joe
sure.
Biden, not as much. Not as much difference there.
Okay, and
Because Joe Biden supported supported segregation and held out, and he also held out on gay marriage and on all of these like conservative policies he continued to support long after it was politically acceptable to support the progressive ones.
okay, I want to ask what you're referencing when you claim that Joe Biden supported segregation, but I'm not going to, because I think
Oh,
that
did you hear what happened at the debate with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden when it came to busing?
busing? Yeah, and so just like I said, I was going to bypass this because I don't think that this is important to the greater discussion. But anyway, I am going to bypass it.
Well, he said racist shit too. Like it's not like it's
So when Trump says the white supremacists who were chanting "Jews will not replace us" in the streets of Charlottesville, when Trump says they're very fine people, when
yeah.
Trump hires as his chief of staff, what was Bannon originally?
Something up there, yeah, in the cabinet.
Whatever it was, that I don't think he was in the cabinet, but it was some high level chief strategist, I believe it was. When Trump hired Steve Bannon as his chief strategist, the man who runs the platform that he proudly declared the voice of the alt-right, when Trump says, tells native-born congresswomen of color to go back to their country, when Trump does all of these things that are explicitly racist, you don't see any difference between that and the kind of rhetoric that Joe Biden has. Could you see Joe Biden saying that the Jews will not replace us tiki torch chanters of Charlottesville are very fine people?
I mean, he's very pro, like almost too much pro like bipartisanship. So I wouldn't be, the way his like head is at, I wouldn't be surprised if he accidentally slipped up and said something like that.
You could actually see Joe Biden going and saying that the Nazis marching "Jews will not replace us" are very fine people. That's a realistic possibility to you.
Not like on purpose, maybe by accident.
And oh my god, there's just, I don't even know where to.
Like if he knew they were white supremacists, then like obviously he wouldn't. But he's not very smart, so.
Okay. And then I want to talk about how Trump has been credibly accused of rape 13 times, but I assume that if I do that, you are going to just bring up Biden and the accusations which have been widely discarded against him, and you'll say that they're equal on that issue as well, I suppose, right?
Well, I do think that large swaths of the ruling class are rapists and pedophiles. Yes,
Okay.
because we
Do
this has
you
been
think,
documented.
could you see Joe Biden going and when a reporter is asking him about Putin slaughtering journalists, could you see Joe Biden saying, well, we're not so great either? Could you see Joe Biden trying to normalize
Well,
the.
well, we're not, aren't we? We're not so great about that. Do you know what's happening with Julian Assange or Edward Snowden, or
Okay, so
we can go down the list?
let's get even beyond Trump here. Do you see any moral difference between the United States and the Russian Federation of Putin? Is there any
There's
substantial difference there?
there's a bit of a difference, yeah. But as far as
A
like
a
jailing
bit of a
journalists, there's
difference.
not much.
Okay. There's no difference between sending armed agents out to go slaughter journalists in the middle of the night and attempting to extradite a man who worked with the Russians to release state secrets. There's no difference there.
Well, he released quote unquote classified information that exposed the war crimes committed by the U.S. government. I would say he did that, but I wouldn't say he. Maybe he had some people that were in Russia that would have worked with him. That is possible, yes. But
But
that doesn't mean
you
that
don't see
doesn't
any
mean he should
difference
be like
between
jailed or like
you don't see any difference though between the treatment of Julian Assange, whether or not say he weren't on the run and he were in the United States,
he's been
and
getting some awful treatment in these jails overseas. So, have you been following that situation at all? Like he's been, like
not
he's been like
particularly, but
starved. He's been like denied hygiene, like just awful things.
so there's no difference between the way that the United States and Russia treat journalists, in your opinion, dissenting journalists.
I would say that Russia does things that are worse. Yes.
What a grand admission there. What a brave stance to take.
So brave, I know. So like yeah, I would say like you can whenever pointing out the wrongness of other countries, like you can say like yes, we do bad things too. Like I don't think that's bad necessarily, but the way he was saying it, like as if to say we are equally as bad as Russia when it comes
Yes,
to.
that's always what it is. That's always how it comes across. Is by all means criticize the United States, but don't do so in a way that acts as if we're no morally superior to literal
Well,
dictatorships and evil regimes across the world. And by admitting that the evil regimes are worse, that's not saying that the United States is perfect, which is something that so many people on Twitter don't understand for some reason. Is or it's this non-central fallacy where unless you say the most extreme thing imaginable, then you're assumed to completely disagree with the concept entirely. Like unless you say, that Biden is a fascist, then that must mean that you love Biden and think there's no problem with him. Unless you say that the United States is just as bad as communist China or Putin's Russia, then you must think that the United States has no problems. Why is that such a common phenomenon for people to partake in?
well, I think that is the situation with Trump is unique because he has been extremely friendly with the Russian government and with the Saudi government. So like two extremely authoritarian states. So I would say like that's why what he said was bad because he's also doing it. Um, he's normalizing the bad things that Russia does, but also normalizing the bad things that we do, and also working together with Russia and the Saudi government and things like that. So I would say like all those things are why it's bad, not necessarily to like. So the idea of like pointing out bad things the U.S. does when discussing the bad things of other countries, I don't think that like that's inherently bad. No.
Do you not see how the effect of that, if we're talking, if the media or whoever it is talking about, the slaughter of Jamal Khashoggi, or if we're talking about the Uyghur genocide in China,
Oh yes, here we go.
and some Rose on Twitter retweets that and says the U.S. has the highest prison population in the world. Do you not see how all that that accomplishes is downplaying the evil of the other regime? How do you see any outcome other than that? Because that is just so indisputably clearly to me the outcome of something like that.
I'm glad we're talking about this because you said I was like tanky adjacent, so like I'm glad we're talking about this. So
Yes.
like I do think there are one-to-one comparisons to be made between the U.S. government and a lot of the actions taken by the Chinese government. I think so. Yeah, like the
Like what, 200 years ago? What
well,
is
let's
the
go.
United
Like
States
so
doing today
so
that is
you can
remotely equivalent to the Uyghur genocide?
here. I was gonna say it now, but then you stopped me. Like you can look at the way we have like national surveillance, and like that is happening also in China, especially like you can look at the numbers of surveillance cameras. There are a disproportionate amount of surveillance cameras in East Turkestan where the genocide is happening. You can look at that as well, and we have a huge mass surveillance state. But I would concede that like yes, the or I wouldn't even consider it a concession. It's just I would say that I believe that like the mass surveillance system in China is quite a bit worse than ours, just based on like the way how smart it is, how they use it. But we are also contributing to genocides all across the world. You can look at Yemen. Look, we are directly funding that genocide by funding the Saudi government, which is then blockading Yemen and making sure like just starving these people, like just committing a genocide by all counts. And we are funding it.
So again, what you're saying right now, what do you think that is accomplishing? What impact do you hope to have in saying what you are saying right now? Like what would you like, if you're saying this to a hall of people, what would you like their takeaway from that to be?
Sure. So the Chinese government is fascist. We should not support the Chinese government at all. We should make sure that people are aware of the war crimes and the domestic awful policy that they have. They are committing a genocide, but that doesn't mean that like that doesn't mean that like our government has a moral superiority to that government. That's
You don't think the United States government has a moral superiority to the Chinese Communist Party?
I would have a hard time saying that they do. Like they have like
Jesus Christ. So again, when somebody tweets about the Uyghur genocide ongoing in China, somebody retweets that and says, "What about what you just said? What about the United States funding the Saudis, genocide in Yemen? What
well, okay.
impact
So
do you think that tweet has when somebody does that?"
Specifically, that interaction that is usually like a tanky talking point to like dismiss all accountability on behalf of the Chinese state. Is like,
Of course, that's what it is.
Well, no,
and that's always the impact.
That's not every time you mention that though. You can't just like whatever talking about the genocide in East Turkestan. Whenever you just ignore it and then go after the American government, that is explicitly pro-China. Like I'm not gonna deny that. Like I argue with those people all the time. Like no, but just bringing up the genocide in Yemen doesn't mean that you support the genocide in East Turkestan or the Chinese government.
It's not just bringing it up out of the blue, though. It's virtually always, but let's just say when it is, even though it virtually always is, but when it is brought up within a discussion of China's actions, do you see any impact of that other than minimizing China's actions and trying to draw a moral equivalence and just say, well, everybody does it, so clearly it's not that big a deal? Do you see any effect that it could have other than that? Because I sure don't.
No, I like every state does it, which is why the idea of states are like that. That's why it's bad. Like I wouldn't say like I don't do that. Like I don't. If someone is talking to me about the about the genocide in East Turkestan, I'm not going to then go and then like, well, that's, I condemn that. But have you seen what like we're doing? Like, I don't do that necessarily.
Necessarily.
No, like that. I don't attempt to downplay genocide.
I don't think you attempt to.
Well,
I don't think
Tanky's
a lot
attempt.
of anarchists attempt to.
Tanky's attempt to
Tanky's
downplay.
attempt to, but I don't
Tanky's
think a lot of
downplay. Yeah.
anarchists do. But that doesn't mean that they don't. I just don't think they attempt
Oh, so
to.
you're admitting I'm not a Tanky then?
I think that, as I've said many times before, I think that the kind of rhetoric that you use directly fuels, the kind of tanky mindset, which is that the United States is, no better than and probably worse than, the Chinese Communist Party or
No.
Putin's Russia or, Assad or all the rest of this. It's just like when somebody is talking about some incredibly evil thing that is happening somewhere else, and somebody says, well, what about this very evil thing that the United States is doing? What I guess, if it's an anarchist saying that, not a literal tanky, I assume that what they want to happen from there is that the people reading will go, wow, yeah, our government really is bad too. We need to oppose these things in our state. I assume that's what they want to happen. But what absolutely happens is they go, because you have to acknowledge where the public is at right now, and 99.5% of the American public does not think that the United States is a fundamentally illegitimate evil regime. Most people like the United States quite a bit, so what they're going to take from that is, well, this person thinks that the United States is as bad as China. The United States isn't that bad, so China clearly must not be that bad either. That's what happens here. Or when you say Biden's no worse than Trump, what you want that to instill in people is to believe that Biden is as bad as Trump, that he's that bad, and that you need to oppose Biden too. What they take from that is, well, Biden's really not that bad, so if you're saying that, he and Trump are only equally bad, then I guess Trump isn't so bad either. That's what is actually happening.
I disagree. I don't really...
On what basis do you disagree? Because, again, think about where the public is at right now. Do you like chocolate? Do you like chocolate?
I'm a big fan of chocolate, yeah.
Okay, good. We all like chocolate. If I come to you and I say chocolate is no better than Brussels sprouts, your resting position, your innate hypothesis, your position right now is that chocolate is delicious. So if I say, there's really no difference between chocolate and Brussels sprouts, your inclination is not going to be to turn on chocolate, which is delicious. Your inclination is going to be that Brussels sprouts probably aren't that bad either. If somebody's saying that, and say that you don't know very much about Brussels sprouts, you haven't actually tried Brussels sprouts yourself. I assume you probably have, but say you haven't. You don't know about Brussels sprouts, all you know is that you really like chocolate. If somebody's saying, I hate chocolate and Brussels sprouts, they're just equally bad, as a chocolate lover and somebody who is not familiar with Brussels sprouts, you're probably going to be inclined to go, well, if this person hates both of these, I like chocolate, so Brussels sprouts probably aren't so bad either. Does that make sense?
Did I say the U.S. government is equally as bad as the Chinese government?
Well, whether it's equally bad or not, okay, that's not. That's
well, you said
central to the point here.
Well, you
say, okay, somebody says chocolate and Brussels sprouts are both awful. Again, now just that. Respond to that now, because that was not the central point of the theme here.
So Brussels sprouts and chocolate are both awful. That's your...
Yeah, somebody says that. You've never tried Brussels sprouts. You know you love chocolate. Is your inclination... Does it not make sense that your inclination would be to go, well, Brussels sprouts probably aren't that bad then, because this person hates Brussels sprouts and chocolate, and I love chocolate, so Brussels sprouts probably aren't too bad either.
Well, I mean, you can bring up the reasons why both are awful, which is what I do. That's why I bring up the reasons
But do you
why
think
Trump
that
and Biden are both
as somebody
awful.
who likes chocolate already, even if this person who is anti-chocolate and anti-Brussels sprouts starts listing reasons why chocolate is bad, say they start talking about how, the mass farming of cows for dairy to make chocolate is evil and all of the,
Okay.
unethical behavior that goes into that, and, maybe the poor working conditions of people who harvest the coca, in foreign countries. They go through all these reasons why, chocolate is bad and why it's immoral to have chocolate. You still loved chocolate to begin with. Maybe now you're maybe a little bit questioning the efficacy of or the ethics of chocolate, but you know that you still love chocolate. You're going to keep eating chocolate anyway.
Well, let's make the one-to-one comparison then. Like, let's say you're talking to a Trump supporter, which is what I do quite often. I had this discussion quite often with Trump supporters, and you're trying to say that you don't like Biden, but you also don't like Trump either for a lot of the same reasons. Like, they both have really bad immigration policy. Like, because the Trump supporter is going to say, oh, Biden's opening the border and all this stuff, but then, like, he's not actually. He's continuing a lot of the same bad immigration policies, which they might agree with. Like, they might agree with those bad immigration policies. So, I mean, maybe they're going to take away from those kinds of discussions that, if they actually were to directly, like, make the same concessions that you would make for, like, Brussels sprouts, maybe they would be like, oh, like, maybe Joe Biden isn't so bad. Because they like the
Isn't
bad
that
immigration
the opposite
policies.
of what you're trying to achieve?
I mean, don't you think so from your perspective, you think that Joe Biden is better than Trump, like objectively on like in most areas. So like for that you would be a win. Like you would get a W. Like I would be doing what you want, right?
Yeah, but that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to convince people that Biden is awful too and they should oppose him, but
Well, no.
that's
They already oppose Biden. I'm trying to get them to oppose Trump too, or at least make them have a
well,
different
did you
opinion on their.
accomplish that in this interaction you're talking about
Absolutely,
where
absolutely
you've
not. They
convinced them?
they ignored all of the facts and logic that I brought to the table and completely were like,
Then that's
no,
exactly what
Joe
I'm
Biden is
saying.
Joe Biden is he's closing the border. Like you're just wrong. Like it's no, they of course they didn't.
Well, then how you're confirming exactly what I'm saying that you
No,
made your
because
all
because
that you got them to do is like Biden more, not like Trump less.
I mean,
Because from their perspective, I mean, it's flipped and weird because they're starting from this opposite point. But for them, compare this to the America China thing. For them, America is Trump and China is Biden, right? So what you got them to do is like China more.
well,
If
no,
Biden is their China, all you got them to do was like China more,
they didn't like
which
Biden
is
anymore.
exactly what I'm saying.
These people don't like Biden anymore. No matter how many times you can bring up how like they're doing a lot of the same things, like
Maybe they
continuing
don't
the
like
policies.
Biden, but you were just saying that they, by showing them that Biden is bad on immigration too, that if anything, and that's what you were just telling me I should see as a win, is that now they have maybe a slightly more positive view of Biden. Maybe they don't support him, but they have a slightly more positive view of him than before. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. When Biden is the China, by saying that China and America, in this case, Biden and Trump, by saying that they're both bad, you don't get them to like Trump slash America less. You just get them to not hate Biden slash China. You just get them to have a slightly more positive view of that. Is that the impact that you want to have here? I don't think it is.
No, and I don't think that's necessarily the impact that I do have. I don't think that they
You
would.
just said it was.
I don't think that they would.
That's what this whole story was about.
Well, no, like the idea is like me bringing it up could make that impact, but it obviously
But did
doesn't.
it?
No, it doesn't.
Then that's exactly what I'm talking about. But that's not what you want to happen. Isn't what happens. It doesn't get them to look more introspectively at the United States and critique its policies and start reading Murray Bookchin, what it gets them to do is go, oh well, China's, not it's not really that big of a deal. They're not really any better than any worse than we are.
I don't really know if there's really
And that
anything you could use to like substantiate any of this.
the interaction you just talked about is a great example, but I mean, I'm sure that you could do polling and stuff that, we don't have the resources to do. It could be substantiated, but your case study provides a great anecdote in and of itself.
Well, you said like most people like America and like what it's doing, right? Like, but
Yes, they do, and there is polling to suggest that the overwhelming majority of Americans are proud of their country. So that's the starting point here, is just how you like chocolate. Most
well,
Americans like America. So when you're comparing things against something that they already like, their inclination is going to be to think more positively of the other thing, not to think more negatively of the thing that they already like.
well, I guess it just depends on what you mean by like liking America. Like, cause I like America, but I don't like what like the government does.
Well, whatever it means when people are you proud to be American? Would you say you're proud to be American?
Uh, Probably not. Like, I don't. It's just
Well,
where I
so
was
most
born.
are. So that's one measure then of however you want to define American pride, which I would define much differently than say a Trump supporter. But regardless, if you're looking at American pride, most Americans are proud to be America. Most Americans have a positive view of America. Most Americans view America as a generally positive force for the world, which I'm sure that you do not agree with.
Wait, what don't I agree with?
That to say America is a generally positive force for the world.
Yeah, no, I would disagree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so most Americans do agree with that, and I'm not just postulating. There is actual credible research to support that. There's, proper surveying, professional surveying done to confirm that. That is a fact, that most Americans view the United States as a positive force, are proud to be American, you know, like living in America, etc. That is as close to an objective fact as anything. So that is a reality that you have to deal with.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be true, even without the polling. Yeah.
So again, that is where you are starting from then, is most Americans are proud of, and view America in a positive light. So again, when you're comparing something against America, you're comparing it against something that they like. So they're not going to start thinking less of America, they're going to start thinking higher of the other thing.
So,
that's
like,
the inevitable result here.
do you think most Americans don't know about a lot of the bad things that we do? Like, they don't know about the genocide that we're doing in Yemen. You know, they don't know about how our voice in the UN is a net negative when it comes to human rights abuses, because we actively protect nations that do human rights abuses. So pointing those out, I don't think that would necessarily think that like they would think that that's good. Like, I don't.
They're
Like,
not going to think that those things are good, but it's if somebody points out the cruelty in the dairy industry, you can acknowledge and admit that that's, bad, but you still like chocolate. It's like, that's not going to get you to stop liking chocolate. You have this lifetime experience with chocolate, and you've grown to like it quite a bit. And even when things that you will fully admit are negative are pointed out to you about it,
well, they don't.
that's not going to that's not going to fundamentally make you rethink your entire framework of chocolate. It might, you can acknowledge the criticisms, but it's just not going to have that drastic impact.
They don't have to not like America and still say that like we should stop doing the genocide in Yemen, or that we should stop holding migrants in concentration camps on the southern border. Like, they can like a.
And bringing those things up in and of themselves as problems is completely fine, and we should continue to do that. But we're talking about when it's being compared to elsewhere, which is, it often is, but that's what we're talking about, is when America is being compared to elsewhere, not just making criticisms of American policies or actions. That's completely fine. I have no problem with doing that. I mean, I still would take issue with saying we're committing genocide. The United States is committing genocide in Yemen. I would take issue with that, but that's not the point right now. The point is about comparing United States actions to others and the impact that that has.
Well, I don't think that like pointing out excuse me, I don't think that pointing out like the genocide in Yemen and also the genocide in East Turkestan, I don't think pointing out that one-to-one comparison to the average America enjoyer who thinks that like we're, doing good things overseas, I don't think like that's going to basically make them think like the policy is good. I think they're gonna think like both are bad, and like we should stop. If we're going to like take the moral high ground, which is what they want to do, they want the American government to be like this bastion of freedom and like all this stuff. Like I don't think they would then say, "Oh, China's doing it, so it's okay." Like no, they wouldn't say that.
But we're just talking about your interaction with this Trump supporter, where in trying to convince him that Biden, China, was
But we're not just talking about that. That's just an example.
yeah, but it gets to exactly what I'm talking about here, where when you're using a comparison of the United States with this other evil place to try to show how bad the US is, it doesn't have that effect. It has the effect of making the other look less bad.
I don't know. I think we're just going around in circles on this.
Because I just can't get you to admit to this, even though you've admitted to every building block of it, but won't agree. You've seen every tree, but you won't see the forest.
Because the average Trump supporter or America enjoyer isn't going to then, say both like if I were to say like, look at this bad thing that we're doing, we're just as bad or almost as bad, or we do bad things too. Like they're not gonna take that and say, oh, China's good. Like they're not gonna do that.
See, you're being too like all or nothing with it. I'm not saying that they're gonna say, oh well, China's fine, or like
That's what you're
you know
saying.
it's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they will have, you know, their mental perception of the evilness of China will decrease by 10% or
I
something.
disagree.
They're not going to say it's fine, but it will somewhat lower their judgment of China, like you did with the Trump guy. You told him how bad Biden's immigration policy is, which to them is a good thing, and he walked away still
Right.
not liking Biden, still liking Trump, but having a somewhat more positive view of Biden than when
Yeah,
he started.
because the average Trump, excuse me, wow, the average Trump supporter is a person who likes bad immigration policy, but I don't think the average. So yes, I would concede on that interaction. Like, yeah, I didn't really give him much of a worse opinion of Trump or even like a better opinion of what I mean. Like I'm not like that didn't achieve my goals that I want to do or like goals that you would want to do, but like. I don't think that, like, then the average America enjoyer is also like the average person who likes genocide.
Okay, that is a better response. That's a more substantial, credible response than what we've been getting so far. So I appreciate that. But like the chocolate thing, if we're gonna keep returning to this because it's worked out pretty well as an analog here. I don't think that you or me, as somebody who enjoys chocolate, is somebody who would be, appreciative of the poor treatment of animals in the dairy industry. That's not something that we're going to go, oh yeah, well that's cool. Like that's fine. I'm fine with that. That's not what you're going to say.
Well, yes,
But you're
because we
not
have
liking chocolate either.
we have the privilege of enjoying that chocolate, so obviously we're not going to want that privilege to go away.
So it's like if we're not prepared to get rid of the chocolate industry, which of course we're not, even though we know that there are exploitative, practices involved both for humans and animals. We know that, and we know that that's bad, but we're not prepared to get rid of the chocolate industry. So it's like if somebody is trying to sell us on the idea that, you know, chocolate is bad and Brussels sprouts are bad, and here's the reasons chocolate is bad, we'll go, okay, those are bad, but, if since I'm still going to support chocolate anyway, even though I know these things are bad, what reason do I have to support Brussels sprouts, which you're saying is bad? Maybe there are bad things about it, but there's bad things about us, and I'm still supporting us, so why should I oppose this? It's this moral relativism that they try to create where it's like, well, you don't have any ground to stand on. You eat chocolate and it's immoral, so what ground do you have to criticize Brussels sprouts? Or even if that's saying that they're defending Brussels sprouts, and we're saying that they're not because they're not an explicit tangy. But do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I would just say like the average America enjoyer, or even just the average American, is like does benefit from our bad actions. So, yeah, I guess.
And so when they're
I
when
guess
they could,
I guess we agree for different reasons there.
like, they could admit that our actions are bad, but they're still going to support us.
Well,
And then so they'll look at the other one and say, well, yeah, their actions are bad, but I'm sure their people have a
but
reason to support them too. So it's really probably pretty equivalent of a thing here.
well,
So,
the problem
I
with
know I'm not going to stop supporting America, so I don't expect them to stop supporting China. We're all just doing our thing here.
the problem with the average America enjoyer or nationalist or Western chauvinist is they won't be able to even admit that the bad things that America does is bad.
Whoever you're talking about there are not common and
Are
are
you?
not the kind of people I'm talking
I think the
about.
average person does agree with American exceptionalism.
To a degree, I mean, in that they think America is a more moral actor than other countries, which I would also tremendously agree with. But that's not the same as saying America's done nothing wrong, America does nothing wrong, etc. Like, that's not the same thing at all.
Like, what about our foreign policy or our influence on the world stage is good?
A tremendous deal, and I think that since its foundation, on the whole, with many exceptions, but on the whole, I think America has been a phenomenally positive influence on the world. It's You start out the country with the first ever successful democratic revolution and foundation of a republican government on the explicit, although not entirely upheld, but on the explicit values of uh, egalitarianism and freedom and the proper role of a restrained limited government. And you can and should argue that there was, the American values were always, have often been and still continue to be hypocritical in some ways. They're saying all men are created equal, all owning slaves, but still the significance of having a founding document saying all men are created equal and imposing, the Constitution with the Bill of Rights imposing strict limits
Yeah.
on the role of government. You don't see how positive of an impact for liberty worldwide that has, even when we don't uphold it entirely. Just
Yeah.
the impact of having these things on paper as concrete legal founding documents is so tremendously important, especially since we were the first country to successfully do this and found a nation on political values. It's not just this is our land, this is our race, this is our people. We're founding a nation on the explicit basis of human equality and limited government, and that is so dramatically important for freedom worldwide.
I would agree. Like those like values on paper are good. Yeah, and I think that like the idea behind our founding is good. Like, and the foundation that we have is like better than most. Um,
And so I'm glad that you will say that and agree with that. Do you see then how that carries to the world stage? We're having a successful revolution on the basis of egalitarian democratic principles, and then having a country successfully begun and run for 248 years or however many it's been now, do you not see how that is an inspiration and a guiding light to democracy and freedom and egalitarianism across the world?
I think the average Afghani child that was living under American occupation, I don't think that whenever they see like tanks with American flags roll into their village, I don't think they like are, you know, filled with images of egalitarian values and like liberty and all that stuff. Like I think that
Do you
like
think
I
anybody across the country or across the world is?
probably
Or are we focusing
probably
just
some
on
people,
Afghanistan?
yeah, but I don't think like probably
So isn't that a positive?
people in other
Isn't that
Western
a positive
countries
that they're when
maybe, but like the point that I was trying to make there was like I don't think that like these, generally speaking, with exceptions, good founding principles and documents, I don't think that like that then means that we have the right to then like be the world police or like be like
that's not what I
have
said. I didn't
no,
say
but that's
anything
what I'm
like
saying
that.
though. That's what I'm saying though. Like I don't think that like we
And that's
like
fine, and I agree
American.
with that, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're
I
talking
thought
about
it
the
was. I'm sorry.
influence of America on the world
Yeah,
stage, not
yeah.
its moral righteousness in commanding the world by force. That's not something I was ever talking about.
Well, that's what I was talking about.
Well, then we're talking past each other. We're
I
talking
guess
about
so. Yeah.
the soft power influence of the United States across the
Well,
world.
I think
I'm not supporting or defending, you know, hard military interventionism across the world, even for the purpose of, you know, democracy building, as the honest neocons would claim that, you know, they support these things for. I'm not talking about or defending that. I'm talking about the soft power influence in the United States and saying
well,
that the US is a positive influence on the world by serving, even greatly imperfectly, as a guiding light for democracy and liberal values.
I
And do you disagree with that?
I would say our power influence on the world stage is not very soft. It's actually very hard. Like we just I mean
Um,
like we can't simultaneously say we support democracy and then overthrow democratically elected leaders across the world. Like you're aware the CIA does this all the time, yeah?
are you familiar with the concept of soft power? Because it's not like a description; it's like a category.
I guess I
That's fine if you're not familiar with the concept, but it's a thing in international relations theory. It's not like a description; it's a category of foreign policy. It's not like saying America's soft power is not making a you know, I'm
yeah,
not.
it's like getting others to do what you want. Like it's like getting others to want the same like results that you want, basically.
More, yeah, it's more, it's like about uh you know, the kind of values and beliefs and things like that you know, are soft, as opposed to, you know, marching in with guns or whatever. And that's two different fields. It's
Well,
not just like I said, it's not a description, it's two different things. So when I'm talking about soft power, I'm talking about influence through rhetoric and in ideology, not, you know, that's it's a different thing than the guns and whatnot.
uh,
That's not
it's not just the
what I'm
guns
talking.
though. A lot of like the words and rhetoric we use also leads to like influence that is um that is ripe with like power differential. Like we have so much influence on the world stage that basically we can do as we will with other countries, like with other their democratically elected leaders, like you know, like do sanctions and do other things, like vote against their rights in the UN, like make alliances with other Western countries to then do what we want because the Western countries aren't going to say no to us.
Do you? I mean, do you think that, say you could snap your fingers and every country on Earth had, and not just like the first day, like it would have been established. Say you could
Okay.
snap your fingers and every country in the world would have the same government system as the United States. Do you think that would overall be a benefit for liberty worldwide?
that is possible, but I don't think like we should do that.
That's not what I'm not saying, we should try to achieve that. I'm just saying if that, like, do you think the United States system of government is a better system of government than the total average human being? If you take all 7 and however many billion people in the world are, 3.5 billion and 1 people living in worse governments than the United States, would you say?
Well, I actually like parliamentary systems better than what we have. So, I mean, maybe like
That's not what I'm asking though.
I know you're talking like the concepts of like every man created equal, like limited government, like things like that. Like, so I think that it is generally speaking better, but like I don't think that most people would want that, and I don't think that we should be making people want that.
You don't think we should be making people? I mean, what do you mean by making people? Before I dive
Like
further into that,
instituting quote unquote democratic governments in other countries.
So you mean by force, though? I mean, do you think that
Everything that our government does is by force?
Okay, that's just an anarchist.
No, it is. No, like on
slogan,
the world stage, we're the most powerful government in the entire world. We can we have so much influence.
And again, by influence, do you mean in terms of people will listen to what we have to say, or
No.
do you mean influence at the barrel of a gun? Because those are two different things.
Yes, we
Do
have.
you see both of them as negative?
I think that influence is in maybe you should do this, and they think, you know what, maybe I should.
And do you think it's so? Yes, exactly that. Do you think that it's a bad thing that the U.S. has that kind of power, that we say something and other countries are inclined to listen?
It depends on what issue you're talking about, because a lot of what our government wants isn't good.
On the whole.
On the whole, man, I don't know.
So, do say Biden, who is obviously powerful, and not just in the means that he commands an army and can institute tariffs. That's not the kinds of things I'm talking about. I'm talking solely about the soft power influence of the American president.
I don't think you can isolate that, though.
You can. That's not ignoring the other. It's just talking about one category. Like I said, soft power is a category. It's not a description. So within solely his focus and power in the soft power sector, do you think it's a positive thing if Biden goes to the UN and gives a speech on the merits of democracy? Do you think that that's a good thing for the world, and do you think it's good that he has the power to do that and people might listen?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes,
it
is good.
I like that. That's cool. I like the idea that you can speak. I think that the general idea of the UN is good, yeah, but I don't think the idea that we're somehow have a moral right to then dictate what other countries do. I don't think that's good.
I wasn't talking about dictating.
I know we're
talking
about that. I know. But I want to make sure that for my sake, my position is clarified there.
Yeah, but
because however good the soft power of the president of the U.S. speaking about democracy may be, in practice we don't do democracy, and we don't get other countries to do democracy either.
You don't think any country in the world has been inspired by
for sure,
either the American Revolution or the events in America since to pursue democracy for themselves? You don't think that that's ever happened?
I think it has happened.
And isn't that a good thing, that countries have been inspired by the United States to seek more freedom for themselves?
To be inspired by the U.S., I think that's be inspired by the U.S. to do democracy and freedom. I think,
in part, or I mean, probably not in full, but in part, they see the United States as a functional representative democracy that broke the chains of aristocracy and now exists as an independent nation. Isn't that a good thing, that they might have been somewhat inspired by that to achieve greater freedom for themselves with their governments?
I mean, I think it's good, but I don't think that's. I don't think that we have a. I don't think we're we necessarily broke the chains of aristocracy. We live in a functional oligarchy, but like, I mean,
There's
it's. I think anytime a country or a people change their government in a way that allows them to have more freedom, liberty, and democracy is a good thing. And if the U.S. somehow, with its flaws, has convinced people in other countries without using a strong arm like our government tends to do in most, if not all cases, if by this, hypothetical situation where we are like saying democracy is good and then these people overseas are like, yeah, it's good. Like, I think that would be a good thing. Yeah. But like, I think
isn't that awesome? Isn't that just the best thing like ever that we could, the idea that we could serve as an example for the world and show them, and and our credibility is hurt greatly by the hypocrisies of United States actions. If we're saying, don't support evil regimes and then we're selling guns to the Saudis, that hurts our credibility in that sector through hypocrisy. If we're trying to support egalitarianism across the world, and then in World War II, if we're trying to position ourselves as the defenders of human rights and democracy, and then half the population of the South isn't allowed in certain diners, that greatly hurts our credibility.
Right.
So,
and I wouldn't say that we are the most democratic country in the world, or like the place where like the most freedom happens, or liberty, or anything like that.
But even if that's the case, and there are ones, if there are countries with more liberty or more democratic systems than ours, which I think there are,
100%, yeah.
Do you think that they have anywhere near the level of influence that the United States has?
No, and they should have more influence.
So do you see, if you're taking two separate things here and combining them, say you assign, say you have two scores 1 to 100. One is amount of freedom / democracy, and one is amount of influence. If you multiplied those scores together for every country in the world, how liberal and democratic they are, and then how much power they have on the world stage, multiply those for every country, do you think there would be a country with a higher score than America?
Probably not, but I don't think that's a good thing.
That may be a regrettable thing, but you realize I just got you to agree that the United States is effectively the strongest voice for liberal democracy in the world.
Yeah, it is. Objectively so, yeah.
Isn't that good? Isn't that great? Even if you wish it wasn't the case and you wish that there were others that were more so, isn't that great that our country can serve as the most powerful defender and promoter of liberalism and limited government and representative government and egalitarianism in the world? Isn't that something to be proud of? That even if we wish that others were more so, or that we were more so, that we are currently at present the greatest force for freedom in the world? Isn't that something good?
No, I think it's awful. I think it's terrible because we don't promote democracy across the world. We in a lot of cases we actively fight against democracy, whether it be at home or abroad. Like, we actively prohibit nations from having their own democracy. Like, we force these nations to have our democracy, which means that we have a dictator that we want. We actively have promoted and do promote fascist regimes across the world. And just look at the Spanish Civil War. Like, we supported the fascists.
But nevertheless, you just said that the United States is the most powerful, most liberal country in the world, and does more than any other country to promote liberal values.
Not the most liberal or democratic, but it is the most powerful.
The fusion of those, it's like I said, with the two scores, you multiply them. But the United States would have the highest score of liberal values times influence.
But the
U.S. has the most.
I would rather most countries be more democratic and more liberal and less powerful.
That's not. I don't really see how that's relevant. particularly.
Because like you're trying to say like I think you're trying to get me to say that the U.S. government is a great liberal democracy and it has a lot of power, and that is a positive influence on the world. That's what you're trying to get me to say, which I'm not willing to make that
Haven't you
concession.
said that? Have you
No,
not said
no,
that?
I
Isn't that what
haven't.
you just said?
I said it is the most powerful, but I didn't say it's the most good, and I didn't say we're the most effective liberal democracy that exists.
Well, you didn't say that we're the, and I didn't say either that the United States is the most democratic or the most free nation. I didn't say that either, nor did you. But it is the most powerful voice for those things on the world stage because,
In
you know,
theory,
say it
yes.
has, yeah. So that's still something super cool. Even despite our flaws, and even though there are others better than us on the one issue, they don't have the amount of influence that we do. So that we can leverage our influence in favor of liberal democracy is fantastic, even though it's not as great as it could be.
Like,
we should be happy and that we're able to influence the world in a positive way by promoting those values and having so many people listen.
like we can say out of our mouth, like Joe Biden can go to the UN and say how great democracy is, and even if some people across the world hear that and go like, wow, he might be right, like we aren't practicing what we preach. We aren't. And
not nearly
you
to the degree as
agree
you,
with
but
this.
I agree with that to a substantial degree. And like I said, there's so many American hypocrisies, especially when you look back into history. But even now, there's still so many American hypocrisies where our actions betray our values, and that's very unfortunate. And we should try to overcome them.
It's most cases we do. Like most cases
the value of having somebody on the world stage who can promote these values, even when we don't live up to them entirely, even when we don't live up to them. But the nevertheless, the power of espousing these values is tremendous. And so here we circle back to President Dave Smith. Do you think President Dave Smith would give speeches to the UN about the importance of democracy and egalitarianism worldwide?
He's a hobbyist and he hates democracy, so obviously not.
Exactly. So what we would have instead is this figurehead of the most powerful country in the world going on the global stage,
please, dear God,
promoting white supremacy and promoting Holocaust denial and attacking democracy and, you know, defending fascists and all of this. It's like
I mean, that would be the first time we've done that.
Is just catastrophic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%.
So how isn't he worse? How wouldn't he be worse?
No, he is.
Than a Biden.
Who? I mean, he would be worse, and like he would obviously not be a good influence on the rest of the world.
And isn't that important? And even the world, yes, but even the United States as well. If you're having, you know, we're trying to get past a legacy, not even just legacy, an ongoing white supremacy in the country. Think about how negative the influence and how many ways that would manifest by having somebody in office who explicitly empowers white supremacy, which Trump already did, and we saw, you know, a large degree how that turned out. Don't you see how that's fundamentally, like, base level important to the very, you know, moral fiber and character of our country in a way that no explicit policy could be? Like, it transcends policy to such a fundamental degree that it's, you know, having somebody in office, even when they're hypocritical about it, who is at least willing to promote the values in spoken word or on paper even,
right,
of democracy and liberalism and egalitarianism and freedom and limited government and all the rest of these things. How, you know, can't you see how important that is? And how that is so fundamentally base level important as to transcend any concrete policy proposal. You know, policies are fleeting and change and can be changed, you know, relatively easily. it's a matter of a vote, and you get the vote and the policy changes. That's, you can always change policy. It's very much harder to change a culture, especially to resuscitate a culture that has died. If you reignite the spark of explicit white supremacy in America, or if you destroy the appreciation for liberal democracy on the world stage, that will take generations to recover. That's in the meantime, we'll see dictators arise. We'll see explicit white supremacist policies return in the South. If you're reigniting, this fundamental cultural change to empower these horrible, insidious, toxic cancers on the very moral fiber of our society and of the world, that is so much more deep and fundamental than any policy. Can't you appreciate that?
Yeah, as much as I would like to see that influence, like that hard influence of like us being the most powerful nation in the world, of us being able to be the like Team America World Police stereotype, as much as I would like to see us like being like imperialist, and for us to stop like being colonialist, and for us to stop exploiting the global South, as much as I would like to see all these things happen, like I do see the things you're saying about how like the cultural impact of say like a Dave Smith character would be worse than the cultural impact of a Joe Biden. But that isn't to say that like I would like the cultural influence of the Joe Biden character either. Which I would. I'm not trying to say that you would either. I think that you would agree with me there too. But I just want to make that clarification.
Yeah. But so, okay, I'm glad that, I mean, it's not much of an accomplishment, but I'm glad that you agreed that Smith would be a worse influence in the soft power sector than Biden. I think I could have gotten you to say that at the beginning.
Yeah.
But can you understand where I'm coming from in saying that the soft power, or the cultural influence on American and world values of somebody like a Smith or a Trump is so much worse than a Biden that it eclipses how a Smith might be better in policy? Like, he's so much worse in culture and values and the things that strike to the very core of humanity and take generations to repair. He's so much worse in that regard that even though he's better on some policies, he's still clearly worse overall, because those fundamental base level values are so awful.
When you're isolating just like the soft power influence, like the values and the culture, like sure I could say that, but like
that's where I'm reaching beyond that now. Can you agree? Two, if you can't agree, can you at least appreciate where I'm coming from in saying
I can appreciate where you're coming from regardless.
Cultural value is so much worse that it eclipses any policies that he might be better in. Frankly, I think that focusing on the policies that he's better on when he is so much worse in that other sphere is just missing the point and giving him so much credit where there shouldn't even be a conversation, in my opinion. It's like he's so, and Trump as well, or they're so bad on this, their fundamental values, that even bringing up policy feels like, frankly, immoral to do. It's like, why are we, these people are white supremacists, why are we even discussing it further? It's like, why is the line not drawn right there? Like, that these people are clear. A white supremacist is worse than somebody who is not a white supremacist. We don't need to talk about their policy positions.
Well, I would think that Joe Biden is a white supremacist, but regardless, like I do appreciate where you're coming from, and I would also, to be fair, say that like a lot of the shit on policy that Dave Smith has spouted is also kind of batshit too. So there is also that.
Increasingly so, yes, and so it's even that gap is minimizing now because he's just openly embracing policies that are
So
evil now. But it used to be the case with the paleos where they would claim to support good policy and then have these horrible, disgusting views.
right.
But I mean, now that even that's changing.
So I would say isolating the issues that I was talking about in my original tweet that I retracted. I would say on the issue of the war on drugs, immigration, and like foreign policy, like war, I would say that, like, yes, Dave Smith is slightly better on those issues, or maybe even a little like more than slightly, but that doesn't mean that like I would vote for him or that he is like better overall. I would say they're either equally bad or Joe Biden is slightly worse.
But you're still saying Biden is worse than Dave Smith?
No, slightly better. Sorry, slightly better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, I thought we were backsliding.
No,
there.
no.
Okay, so that's something. But so again, I feel like this is something that you have like missed with where I'm coming from, and I'm glad that we're talking about this. Is what we were just talking about, that the influence of a Dave Smith or a Trump or some other explicit white supremacist or somebody who enables white supremacy, even a Spike Cohen. I don't think by any means Spike is a white supremacist or a fascist or any of these other things, but he is increasingly promoting those who are. Right? Would you agree with that?
Sadly, yes.
Yes. So even somebody like a Spike, much less a Smith or a Trump, even somebody like a Spike, I think the damage that would be done to our culture and values and those of the world is so tremendous and would take such generations to fix that it transcends any area where he might be superior in policy to the status quo choices.
So in a hypothetical election between Spike Cohen, Trump, and like a Kamala Harris, like you would say that Spike Cohen is worse than those? Or
among those choices I would, and I despise her, but I would tremendously prefer Kamala to win that election. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not even trying to like defend Spike because I don't like what he's done in the past, and I feel like he showed signs originally of being very like socially progressive on issues that I care about, and like being very pro like BLM and all those good things that I want to see from like a good libertarian. So I'm not gonna, but recently I'm not gonna defend what he's been, the side that the quote unquote side that he's taken.
But so like, can you appreciate where I'm coming from in my answer and saying
I can appreciate that, but
you're acknowledging that Spike has platformed these horrible ideas and continues to do so and promote figures that espouse awful values.
Disappointingly so, yes.
Yeah. So do you think that giving him the power of the most, influential and powerful office in the world and having him continue to engage in that behavior, do you see how damaging that would be?
I could see it be damaging, yeah, but like looking at harm reduction.
Even if you don't agree, can you see how somebody could make the value calculation from there that the damage that he would do would be so great as to transcend, the discussion of even policy positions? That, yeah, obviously Spike's policy positions on everything are phenomenally better than Kamala's. You'll get no argument from me there. It's from even anybody who's even remotely libertarian.
It's just a vibes thing for you. It's just a vibes thing.
Is that what you see all this what we've been talking about is vibes?
Yeah, dude, just vibes. No, I'm joking. It was a joke.
That's the thing that I think so many anarchists either underappreciate or entirely fail to appreciate, though, and do regard as just like vibes or just lipstick on a pig or window dressing. Like anytime anybody talks about values or like principles or institutions or influence or anything like that, it's like, oh, those aren't real. Like those that's just like stuff dumb liberals like to talk about. None of that means anything. Like the only thing that actually matters is the policies, which is then where you get the calculation that a white supremacist with good policies is better than a non-white supremacist with bad policies. And that's just completely missing the point here. It's not just superficial stuff. Like influence and institutions and values aren't just meaningless, fluff that liberals like to talk about. These are the things that are more important than any policy, because they're the things that underlie policy. For one thing, all of these values are the things that become reflected in policy later on. But it's the impact of empowering white supremacy or any other kind of bigotry or fascist ideologies is it that damage is irreparable, or if it is repairable, it takes generations to do so, and
Yeah.
it's just that it goes beyond any policy.
I think that, like, saying a lot of like good things about like liberal democracy and like having these like basic statements about like freedom and liberty and all that stuff is like good, and like I can see where you're coming from, and like I respect it. Like I don't think like you're an evil person for like saying that a non-white supremacist with bad policies is better than a white supremacist with good policies. Like I agree that like I think we should stop the spread of white supremacy like at just about any cost, and like we should seek to reject people that want to uphold white supremacist systems. But like I don't like Spike, and I don't like what he's done recently. As far as like promoting these people, like promoting people that promote alt-right types, and sometimes him actively promoting alt-right ideals recently. But like I don't think that like he, in the same way as like a Dave Smith or a Trump type, would uphold white supremacist systems, if that makes sense.
It would be less bad. Like a President Spike would certainly be less bad than a President Smith.
And I would
absolutely.
I would then further say
Spike,
that like a Spike presidency would be less bad than a Kamala presidency.
On policy, I think that is true, but I think that the damage done of his enabling of white supremacy, even though at least, unlike Dave Smith, at least he wouldn't be explicitly saying it himself. He would quote unquote only be empowering it, not literally engaging in it. So
like,
that would be improvement. But
him with the office of president
would transcend how much better he would be in policy, because like I said, this is above and beyond policy, and it's before and it's after policy. It surrounds policy. It in every way eclipses policy.
Like him in the office of like the presidency, like how would he be similar to like a Donald Trump, Dave Smith type? Like how would he be empowering alt-right people and like white supremacists? Like how would he be doing that? Like,
I mean, for one, his cabinet would probably be composed of various ne'er-do-wells from the Mises Caucus and other toxic libertarian circles. The kind of rhetoric that, I mean, it's like, look at what he does now with his social media, and then just imagine that coming from a president with 500 billion times the amount of influence that he has now. So it's just, I don't think it takes that much imagination to imagine what he would do. He's already doing it. Just imagine it on a platform with indescribably more attention and power.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not even gonna attempt to like defend him right now, just because like I'm so like I guess disappointed would be the word, because I saw a lot of potential in Spike, and he has a lot of good. He has
many times as well.
He has a lot of like. He has a lot of good people around him, and like the old like Team Supreme people, like those people are good people, and like they used to like Spike too, but then like Spike kind of burned the bridges between him and the Team Supreme people, and then
Yep.
built the bridge with the Mises Caucus people
Yep.
because they used
That's
to not like him very much, if you remember.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I do. I do remember, and I've gone through this many times. I liked Austin Peterson back in like
oh
2016, and
god,
now he's just a disgusting.
yeah, I would argue that
Did I lose you there? My computer like went to sleep or something.
you
Am
lost me
I
for a
still with
second.
you
You're
there?
back.
Okay. But yeah, like I was saying, I liked Austin Peterson. Now he's the most just disgusting scumbag in the world. But there was a time where I liked him, and then he betrayed all my values and became what he is. I used to absolutely love Larry Sharp. He was like my number one libertarian hero, and I'm disgusted with him now.
Yeah,
I was friends with Spike. I went on his show twice, and it was very weird to see a guy whose podcast I was on twice, on the national, presidential election ticket. That was very odd, but I mean, yeah, Spike sucks now. It's like this has happened many times, and I definitely feel it, and I'm sorry for the people who felt burned by him. It's like I like to think that I have a more active radar for this kind of thing after being burnt so many times myself, which is why I'm often able to call these things before they happen at a time where others are still rejecting that they are, only for them to, then later come to pass.
yeah. I've become I'm becoming increasingly like
Jaded.
disappointed in like most libertarians. It's so bad.
Yep.
And
That's part of the cycle.
and
That's like,
go for it. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go for it.
yeah, just it's like this happens, and then you have to make the call. Like either you have to cut these people loose, or you have to go down the rabbit hole with them. And it's a whole lot make the second choice, and it's a huge problem in the Libertarian Party. It's one of the biggest problems in the Libertarian Party and libertarian movement generally. But it's such a painful call to make because you've oftentimes invested yourself in these figures, whether literally by working on their campaign or something, which a lot of people do, or giving them money, or just promoting them on social media. You've been promoting these people to your Twitter followers, and maybe even like trying to tell your real life friends or your parents to check them out or something, and then they start turning like this, and it's like, well, what am I supposed to do now? It's
Right.
like I've invested myself in these people, and now they're going down a direction I don't want to follow. But it's like, what are you supposed to do? So that's a hard call for a lot of people, and a lot end up just following where they're going, and that's a big problem.
Yeah, and I'm still in the Libertarian Party, but it's becoming increasingly hard for me to like recruit people that I want to recruit because I want to like bring in good people, like good, progressive people, like good,
That's
people
gonna be really
who
hard
are
to do.
people who are like left adjacent or even outright left that are anti-authoritarian. But like how am I in good conscience supposed to like recruit these people to this party whenever it's becoming increasingly infested with alt-right white supremacists? Like I
and not only is it a conscious issue, which it definitely is, but it's like, how are you gonna make yourself look if you're saying, guys, join this party. I'm a member of this party. I'm promoting this. Like I'm doing this.
yeah
And then they look up, they go Google Libertarian Party, and the first thing they're gonna see is probably like, articles, Libertarian Party of New Hampshire tweets, effectively white supremacy is good or something like that. It's like
yeah
that's what they're gonna see, and they're gonna go like, uh, you know, why is this guy telling me to join this? Like, I'm not sure how I,
mm-hmm.
feel about this guy. It's like you're putting your reputation on the line personally by continuing to advocate for the party, and it's like
yeah
that's something I certainly am not willing to do. But your conscience issue goes beyond that and is very important as well, where it's like, even besides what you think of yourself, is it moral to try to direct people to a party that is enabling, fascist sympathy and white supremacy? It's like, is that an ethical thing to do fundamentally? And I have well made the calculation by now that it's not.
Yeah, I say it's getting there for me. Like I'm just kind of holding out to see what happens. But my willingness to hold out is becoming increasingly uh less, basically.
Yeah, for me, it's not even about whether the Mises Caucus succeeds or not, because I think they already have. It's the
Hmm.
fact that the party is lying ambivalent to whether this takeover happens or not, and I think that that tells me all that I need to know about the party to know that I do not want to be a part of it.
Well, the LNC,
Regardless whether they succeed or not, the fact that the party is ready to let them succeed,
yeah.
even if they end up failing, they were there ready to let them succeed, and that tells me everything I need to know about them. If they don't care whether they're taken over by fascists or not, I'm not going to be a part of. Like, if your organization is ambivalent to being taken over by fascists, that's not an
Yeah.
organization I am willing to be a part of, whether or not it actually happens or not.
Looking at like the Joe Bishop henchman and like the New Hampshire situation, like no matter what anyone thinks about like the morality of what what Joe did or didn't do in New Hampshire or whatever, like taking all that away, they had a vote to like after all this had taken place, they had a vote to disaffiliate New Hampshire, and the fact that like they didn't do that is evidence of the incapability of the LNC to stop the growing influence of white supremacy in this political party. They just don't care, and they never will
Absolutely.
care.
And yeah, I would go beyond incapability. I think it's a lack of desire. I don't
Yeah.
think that they're unable to do it. I think that they are not interested in doing it. And I
Mm,
think they've given every, that's I don't think that's by any stretch an unrealistic or uncharitable view. I think that they've more than shown that. So then the question is, why would we want to support a party that is not interested in preventing itself from being overtaken by white supremacists and fascists? If this is a party, and it's not just the state chapters, like you just said, it's the national
mm-hmm.
party. So it's not just like a bad actor situation. It goes to the very core of the national party. If the national party is not willing to take a stand on this, and by effect it is taking a stand in favor of it, why would we want to support that when that's clearly who they are? Like, it's who was it that said, when someone shows you who they are, listen?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
That I mean,
how many
Joe
times do we
Joe
need to
said
be
that
shown what the Libertarian Party is?
Joe said that in his letter of resignation to the LNC. Like he was like,
Well, I
if
mean, the quote doesn't come from him
I know,
originally,
I
but
know,
yeah,
he used the quote.
yeah. But so how many times do we need to be shown? It's like I feel, you know,
But
I
then, but then you would then make that same like claim about even like people who are vaguely libertarian, like organizations that are vaguely libertarian too, like SFL or like C4SS. Like you would say those people are also like part of that problem too, right?
I don't know a lot about Students for Liberty, so I'm not going to speak on that. And my problems with C4SS are many, but entirely different than this. It's not My problems with C4SS are not in the same regard that my problem with the Libertarian Party
Like
is.
how
Those are
so?
those are because the my problem with C4SS is just that I hate anarchism and I hate anti-capitalism, things like that. That's not the same criticism, that we're talking about of the Libertarian Party. That's a different thing.
So you would say that like organizations like C4SS are better than the party, like the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's cool.
Especially like Cato or something like that is immeasurably better. But yeah, I mean, I do not like C4SS, but they are better than the Libertarian Party. Yeah.
I think that
Because the
Cato is
problems I have
overall
with
good too.
C4SS apply equally to the Libertarian Party, whereas the criticisms I have of the LP do not apply necessarily to C4SS. So really, it's an easy calculation to make. It's like the LP has the problems with both of them, and C4SS only has its own problems. So it's like, yeah, C4SS is clearly better. It's I don't like it, but it doesn't have all these other problems in addition to it that the LP also does.
Sure. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know. I'm sure we could go on forever, but we're reaching our nice round time now, so we might as well just wrap this up for now.
I guess. So I appreciate the discussion, and I'm glad, even if it got like a little bit I wouldn't say heated, maybe like more like even if it got like adjacent to a debate at times, I'm glad it like wasn't just like a debate and it was like a
I
good
knew that
discussion.
obviously, like, the point of having the discussion is that we disagree on a lot of things, so it's like it is effectively a debate. I just didn't want it to be like a debate TM, which I don't think it really was.
That's fair.
You know,
Well,
because then it's
I
like
appreciate it. So are you gonna stop talking shit on Twitter or no?
I mean, I'm not going to stop criticizing until I have, concrete reason to believe that those criticisms are no longer valid, but...
Like, you still, coming out of this conversation, think that I am, like, tanky adjacent and, like, all those other things, too?
Not deliberately, but I never thought you were deliberately.
Well, then the answer is yes, then, huh? Because, like...
I think that a good avenue was opened here.
Fair enough. I guess that's good enough.
Yeah. I think that I mean, I feel like this more focused on you, like, asking me things and me presenting my case than the other way.
You asked me a lot of things, too. I felt like I was having to... Really, I was struggling to answer all those questions, too.
I mean, I still felt like I was more imposing my case on you than the alternative. So in that regard, I hope that I have given you things to think about and maybe, consider more before you do things like, say Dave Smith is more ethical than Kamala or something like that on Twitter again. That
yeah,
I've
long retracted that statement, so it's not gonna be a thing.
So, yeah, that's what I mean by it. I think we've established a productive avenue of discourse here.